NonCompliance Academy video lectures. My name is Davidzo Paradzai. I am going to take you through the Code of Professional Conduct Part 2 of 3 parts within this video lecture. Make sure before watching this video lecture, you have watched Part 1. You will watch this part and watch Part 3 last. Part 2 of the CPC is found within your handbooks. Within the CPC relates to professional accountants in business. Taking their position and seniority within an organization, these individuals have an expectation out of them that they should behave ethically to run the business effectively, whereby they may be faced with ethical dilemmas. The CPC Part 2 has sections that outline the requirements or safeguard steps to take in the event that they are confronted with an ethical dilemma. You will find they may be confronted with conflict of interest. They are not so sure which decision to take. The CPC outlines how best to behave in that situation. Preparation and presentation of information. They are not supposed to be associated with any misleading information towards the public. Therefore, the CPC has conditions, factors, and also safeguards that they have to implement in the event of coming across misleading information. Acting with sufficient expertise. It is expected of them that they act with sufficient expertise, show their competence within every work that they perform. They may have financial interests, compensation and incentives linked to financial reporting and decision making. The CPC outlines how best to behave when they have incentives linked to financial reporting and decision making. What if they have inducements? They have been given gifts and hospitality. They are giving out a tender. Then they are approached by someone with gifts so that they give the tender to that particular person. How best do they behave? It is outlined within the CPC. They may be faced with pressure to breach fundamental principles unethically. Therefore, they have to go to the CPC and understand and implement the recommendations, the safeguards of the CPC. We have mentioned that professional accountants in business are key individuals within an organization. That will be your CEO, your chief financial officer, the finance director, in their day-to-day dealings within the entity. They are working for the entity. They may uncover instances of non-compliance with laws and regulations. Highly examinable is Section 260 of the Code of Professional Conduct. Within Part 2, they have to respond to the non-compliance with laws and regulations. There are steps of responding to non-compliance with laws and regulations outlined in that part of the CPC Section 260. Make sure it is flagged before you go to the test or exam. So, within Section 260 of Part 2 of the CPC, you will find guidance on behalf of a senior PAIB, that is a senior professional accountant in business, or other PAIB. A senior PAIB is someone who has influence within the organization, who can make decisions on how are we going to deploy our resources. Therefore, they exert significant influence within the entity. They have steps that they follow. If the person within the organization is not a senior, they have to follow the steps for other professional accountant in business. So make sure, given a scenario, you are able to tell, am I dealing with a senior or I'm dealing with other, and you follow the respective steps. These individuals must always comply with applicable laws and regulations that are within the entity they are working for. What type of regulations could these be? It could be tax regulations, environmental regulations. Have they come across any information on bribe, corruption, fraudulent reporting, any unlawful act? It has to be reported, and the steps are outlined within the CPC. So what happens? They become aware of non-compliance with laws or regulations or any suspected NOCLA. They should obtain an understanding of the matter. What really happened? What were the circumstances surrounding the matter? What consequences does this matter have on the organization? That is the employees, investors, creditors, the public as a whole. They have to act in the public interest. Step 3, discuss the matter. You have uncovered non-compliance with laws and regulations. Who do you tell first? Do you seek advice within the organization? Do you report to human resources? So the CPC outlines the steps. Discuss the matter within the organization. Seek advice with any regulatory body. Seek advice from lawyers. Report the matter accordingly whenever a chartered accountant uncovers non-compliance with laws and regulations. Determine whether further action is needed. The chartered accountant has disclosed the matter within the organization. Is it to their superior? Is it to the audit committee, those charged with governance? Thereafter, depending on the response of who they reported to, they have to determine how the matter was actioned on. And if necessary, they have to decide on further action. Am I going to tell the regulatory body? Am I going to tell the Institute of Chartered Accountants on the matter that I have uncovered? Am I going to tell ZIMRA that within the organization that I'm working for, there is non-compliance with tax laws and regulations? Throughout the process, it is necessary for the chartered accountant to document the steps that they took. They uncovered a particular matter. They reported to their supervisor. How did the supervisor respond? Was the response satisfactory? How did the audit committee, those charged with governance, respond? Therefore, it is necessary that all this information is documented so that it is clear and the chartered accountant has followed all the steps within the CPC as found in section 216. Let us do another practice question. I want you to identify the issues, follow through so that you can tell, am I dealing with a senior PAIB or this is an other PAIB? Is this a professional accountant in business? Is this a professional accountant in public practice? Thereafter, you'll be able to know where in the CPC am I going to take the steps to follow in this particular situation. So the practice question reads, Lois Margo, CAZ, is the finance manager at Excel and reports directly to Kunashe Moyo, who is the finance director. During the year, Lois came across a report prepared by Kunashe Moyo for submission to the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education, detailing the bursary scheme run by Excel. Lois noticed that Kunashe had reported that they currently had 1,500 learners on Excel bursary scheme for the 2017 academic year, contrary to her knowledge, as she was only aware of 850 learners on the scheme. As part of running the bursary scheme, Excel received an annual grant of 1,000 per student from the ministry, and the report that was prepared by Kunashe was the one used by the ministry to calculate the grant to Excel for 2017. On inquiry with Kunashe about the possible overstatement, Lois was told to mind her own business as the report to the ministry was above her pay grade, and she should not have seen it in the first place. Then the required reads, discuss with supporting reasons the actions that should be taken by Lois Mago on discovery of the possible overstatement of the number of bursary students in the report prepared by Kunashi. Lois Mago, finance manager, discovers non-compliance with laws and regulations defrauding the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education that was done by their superior, the finance director. They approach their superior, who then says, mind your own business, as the report to the ministry is above your pay grade, and you should not have seen it in the first place. Then you're asked to discuss the actions that should have been taken by Lois Mago on discovery of the possible overstatement. Who is Lois Mago? Finance manager. Yes, she makes decisions for the entity, qualifies as a senior PAIB. You then go to the CPC, senior PAIB. She is working for Excel. Therefore, she's a professional accountant in business, and you follow the respective steps for compliance with reporting, non-compliance with laws and regulations. What are the key desired outcomes of non-compliance with laws and regulations? What are the key desired outcomes of NOCLA? Protecting and promoting the public interest, stimulating greater accountability within organizations, protecting and strengthening reputation of the profession. There are steps that can be followed in the event of uncovering non-compliance with laws and regulations. Moving on to part 3 of the CPC, which relates to professional accountants and public practice, that is your auditors, any tax practitioners, those providing accounting services, technical consultants. In their day-to-day operations, they will be faced with conflict of interest, whereby, given a scenario, you should turn to your CPC, Part 3, Section 310, if it relates to conflicts of interest for professional accountants in public practice. If it is a situation to do with professional appointments, Section 320, when they were appointed to take up an engagement with a particular client, which steps are they supposed to follow? If engaged to offer a second opinion, one professional accountant came and gave an opinion, you are then asked to come and provide a second opinion. How do you protect, how do you avoid bringing disrepute to the profession? How do you maintain professional behavior in that situation? It is outlined in Section 321. For fees and other types of remuneration whereby the client is going to pay you, are you heavily dependent on the client's fees? Is it so big a client that you may compromise your judgment because you want to keep getting big funds? Or is it to do with contingent fees? What does the CPC say in the event that you're offered contingent fees? If fees have been overdue for a long time, how then do you behave? Would that have a self-interest on your part? It is outlined in the CPC Part 3 under Section 330. In the event that you're given gifts and hospitality, Section 340 outlines any safeguards that you could put in place to avoid threats to fundamental principles. For a professional accountant in public practice, you are the auditor. The client approaches you and they want you to keep their assets for some time. Do you then combine those assets with your assets? Section 350 outlines custody of client assets, how best to avoid any ethical dilemmas because of holding client assets. Part 3 of the Code of Professional Conduct, which relates to professional accountants in public practice, also has a section to do with responding to non-compliance with laws and regulations. That is section 360. Equally important, highly examinable. Make sure you have highlighted that part in your handbooks before you go to the test or exam. So you should be clear of the structure of the CPC. Am I dealing with part 1? Am I dealing with part 2? Part 3? Is this individual a professional accountant in business? Is this individual a professional accountant in public practice? Lois Margo was working at Excel, professional accountant in business. Now I have an auditor who has uncovered non-compliance with laws and regulations at their audit client. Which steps do they take to report the non-compliance with laws and regulations? It is clear that it is critical that you are clear on the different individuals and which section to go to so that you advise the correct steps. So the categories of professional accountants in public practice are the auditor, engaged to perform an audit of financial statements, or a professional accountant in public practice who provides professional services other than audit of financial services. They also have steps more or less the same as the part 2 steps, but make sure you understand which part you have been asked. The professional accountant in business must always comply with applicable laws and regulations to do with their work and responsibility towards the public. So when they become aware of NOCLA or suspected NOCLA, they should obtain an understanding of the matter. The nature of the matter, circumstances in which the matter occurred, what impact does it have on the public? Discuss the matter. Now this individual is an auditor. They have come to an organization that they are auditing. Who do they discuss the matter with? Do they inform the audit committee, those charged with governance? Who do they tell? They have to discuss the matter. So section 360 outlines the steps that the individual has to follow. After reporting that matter, determine whether further action is needed, depending on the response of the personnel who they told about that matter. If applicable, decide on further action. What then should I do? Should I report to the governing body? Should I report to the regulatory body? Should I report? Where do I report this matter? It is outlined in the CPC. Documentation is critical. As mentioned earlier on, there is need to document every step that they followed in reporting non-compliance with laws and regulations. This brings us to the end of part 2 of the video lecture on the CPC. Let's meet in part 3.